The battlefield was covered in smoke. The air was heavy with the smell of burned metal and blood. Explosions echoed across the alien plains, shaking the ground under every step. Human soldiers fought desperately against towering alien machines that seemed endless. In the middle of that chaos stood a soldier named Daniel. He was young, but already carried the weight of 100 battles on his shoulders. By his side fought his closest friend and comrade, Marcus. Together they had survived ambushes, raids, and firestorms. They trusted each other more than anyone else in the galaxy. Daniel and Marcus had a way of moving together. One fired while the other covered. One advanced while the other watched his back. They were like two halves of the same blade. For years, war had been their life. But in each other's company, they had found strength. That day, however, destiny had something darker waiting. The aliens pushed harder than ever. Their glowing weapons cut through walls and shields. Their armor was like moving fortresses. Daniel and Marcus fought side by side, their rifles blazing. Sweat ran down Daniel's forehead as his hands shook from the endless recoil. Still, he did not stop. He could not stop, because Marcus was there, yelling over the chaos. "Stay low. Dan, don't give them an easy shot." Then it happened. A streak of blue plasma cut across the battlefield. It was so fast Daniel almost missed it. But he didn't miss the scream. Marcus staggered, clutching his chest. His rifle fell from his hands. For a second, time froze. Daniel's eyes widened as he rushed forward, grabbing his comrade before he hit the ground. "Stay with me, Marcus, stay with me," Daniel begged. But Marcus's breath came in broken gasps. Blood seeped through his armor, glowing faintly in the alien light. His eyes tried to focus on Daniel, but they were fading. "You've always been my brother," Marcus whispered. Then silence. The battlefield noise still roared, but for Daniel, everything had gone quiet. The weight of his comrade's body was heavier than all the battles he had ever fought. Something inside Daniel cracked. Grief turned into rage. He grabbed his rifle and fired with blind fury. Every alien that came close was torn down. Every step he took was soaked in vengeance. He shouted Marcus's name as if his voice could bring him back. But no voice, no bullet, no scream could undo what had just happened. By the time the reinforcements arrived, Daniel was standing alone. His armor scorched, his face streaked with tears and dust. Marcus's body lay still beside him. The other soldiers looked at Daniel with silent respect. They could see the fire in his eyes, but they could also see the hollow emptiness. The kind that came when a man lost more than a comrade. He had lost a brother. Later, back in the military base, Daniel sat alone in his quarters. The walls were gray, the lights too bright. But nothing felt real anymore. Every corner reminded him of Marcus. Every memory of laughter, every old story, came back like knives in his chest. He remembered the promises they made. To go home together. To survive no matter what. And now one of them was broken. Broken in a way that could never be repaired. Daniel stared at the floor, his hands trembling. The war outside continued. The alarms, the commands, the marching boots. But inside that small room, only silence existed. He thought about how fragile everything was. How one moment a soldier could laugh, and the next he could fall into the dirt forever. And he wondered, not for the first time, why it wasn't him lying there instead of Marcus. The hours passed, but Daniel could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Marcus falling. Every time he tried to breathe, he felt the weight of guilt. He replayed the battle again and again in his mind. Was there something he could have done? Should he have moved faster? Should he have taken the shot meant for his comrade? These questions burned him more painfully than any wound. And in that torment, he whispered to himself, "I will never forget you, Marcus, never." The words echoed in the silence. But the silence did not answer. It only pressed heavier against his chest. For Daniel, the war was not just against aliens anymore. It was against the emptiness inside his own soul. And somewhere deep in that emptiness, a shadow waited. A shadow that would soon take the form of a knock on his door. A knock that would change his life forever. The war raged on outside, but inside Daniel's quarters, silence was his only companion. The walls seemed to close in tighter each night. Every shadow felt alive, whispering the name of Marcus. Daniel sat on the edge of his bunk, hands pressed against his face. He could still feel the weight of his comrade's body in his arms. The sound of that final breath echoed louder than the explosions on the battlefield. He walked to the small mirror fixed above the wash station. The man staring back at him was not the same soldier anymore. His eyes were darker, hollow, carrying storms that never ended. His face looked older than his years, as if grief had carved deep lines into his skin. He punched the side of the mirror, cracking it. But the reflection still stared back, broken into sharp pieces. It was a reminder that he too was broken. At night, sleep was no escape. Every dream dragged him back to that battlefield. He saw Marcus fall again and again. Sometimes he dreamed he could save him. Sometimes he dreamed it was his own chest burning with plasma. But every time he woke, Marcus was still gone. And the silence in his quarters felt heavier than the war outside. The soldiers in the base gave Daniel space. They respected him, but they feared the emptiness in his eyes. He trained harder than anyone. He pushed his body until it bled. But no amount of training could erase the memory of that day. He carried Marcus's dog tag on a chain around his neck, gripping it like a lifeline whenever the grief was too strong. One evening, as the base settled into uneasy quiet, Daniel sat by the narrow window. Outside, the alien sky burned a strange shade of violet. The stars looked sharp and distant, like cold diamonds scattered across black glass. He thought of home, of the earth he had not seen in years. He thought of promises broken, and for the first time, he whispered something he had never dared say aloud. Maybe I don't want to survive anymore. The words chilled him. They hung in the air like a curse. Daniel shook his head, gripping Marcus's tag tighter. He told himself survival was the only way to honor his comrade. But the doubt was already planted. The shadow inside him grew larger with every passing night. It was then, in the middle of that fragile silence, that something shifted. A sound he had not heard in weeks. A knock at his door. At first, he thought it was his imagination. The shadows in his mind playing cruel tricks again. But then the knock came again, firmer this time. 3 steady taps that echoed through the room. Daniel froze, his hand tightening around his rifle on instinct. Few people ever came to his quarters uninvited. Slowly, he rose to his feet, boots heavy against the floor. He stepped toward the door, heart pounding like a war drum. The knock came again, softer now, almost hesitant. Daniel pressed his palm against the metal panel. He hesitated, breathing in the silence one last time. Then he opened it. Standing there in the dim corridor light was a figure he never expected. A young woman, her eyes sharp yet filled with sorrow. Her uniform was simple but carried the insignia of someone newly arrived. Daniel blinked, disbelief tightening his chest. Because her face carried echoes of Marcus. The same shape of the eyes, the same determined chin. It was like seeing his comrade alive again, but gentler, younger. She looked at him, steady and unshaken. And in a voice that trembled but did not break, she said, "I am Marcus's sister." The words cut through Daniel like a blade. He staggered back slightly, his heart racing. Of all the things he had expected, this was not one. The grief he thought was his alone suddenly stood before him in living form. Her eyes glistened as she looked at him. And before Daniel could speak, she added something that left him speechless. "I came here because I need to talk to you. And I have a proposal." The silence of his quarters was broken at last. But what replaced it was heavier, sharper. A new storm had entered his life. And Daniel knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. Daniel stood frozen at the doorway. The corridor lights flickered above, casting long shadows across the floor. Marcus's sister stood there, her eyes steady, as if she had been preparing for this moment for a long time. Her voice still echoed in Daniel's ears. "I have a proposal." The word twisted inside him like a riddle, heavy and unsettling. He finally stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. She walked in slowly, her boots quiet against the metal floor. Daniel closed the door behind her, and for a moment, silence filled the room again. But this silence was different. It was waiting. The young woman scanned the room, her gaze falling on the cracked mirror, the unmade bunk, and the rifle leaning against the wall. It was the room of a man carrying too many ghosts. Daniel cleared his throat, his voice low and rough. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "This is no place for you." She turned to him, her chin lifted with quiet defiance. "I came because I had to, not because it was safe," she answered. Her tone reminded him of Marcus. The same fire, the same refusal to back down. and that resemblance pierced him deeper than any blade. Daniel wanted to ask 100 questions. Why was she here? How had she crossed the war lines? What did she mean by proposal? But the words caught in his throat. Instead, he gestured to the chair near the table. She sat, her hands folded tightly together, knuckles pale. Daniel stayed standing, pacing slowly, his chest heavy with confusion. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but carrying the weight of storms. "My name is Alara," she said. "I am Marcus's sister, and I know what he meant to you." Daniel froze, gripping Marcus's dog tag around his neck. The memories rose again, sharp and unbearable. "He was my brother in arms," Daniel whispered. "He was everything." Alara nodded, her eyes glistening but refusing to break. "I know," she said softly, "but that is why I am here." She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping lower. "I didn't come only to grieve. I came because Marcus left me something meant for you." Daniel's heart slammed in his chest. He stared at her, unable to move. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice sharp. She reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a small, worn data chip. She placed it gently on the table, the metal surface reflecting the dim light. "This is his last message," Alara said. "He recorded it before his final mission, and he told me, if anything happened to him, I should bring it to you." Daniel's breath caught. The room seemed to shrink around him. He reached out slowly, his fingers trembling as they hovered above the chip. He had faced alien weapons, death, and nightmares. But nothing had ever made his hands shake like this. The thought of Marcus's voice, preserved in that tiny piece of metal, was almost unbearable. Alara's eyes didn't leave him. "There is more," she continued, her tone firm. "This is not just about grief, it's about choice, about what happens next." Daniel finally looked at her, his voice a whisper. "What do you mean?" Her gaze was unwavering, filled with something he couldn't yet name. "I came here not only as his sister," she said slowly. "I came here with a proposal that will test your loyalty, your future, and everything you believe about this war." Daniel's chest tightened. The shadows of memory pressed harder. He thought he had already carried the heaviest burden a soldier could. But as Alara sat before him, eyes glowing with determination, he realized something. The true weight had only just arrived. And whatever this proposal was, it would not only change him, it would change the course of everything. The data chip sat between them like a silent heartbeat. Daniel's eyes refused to leave it, his fingers hovering but never touching. Alara leaned forward, her voice low and steady. "You need to listen to it, Daniel. But first you must understand why I am here." Daniel's jaw tightened. He felt torn between rage and fear. "I don't need more ghosts haunting me," he muttered. But Alara shook her head, determination burning in her eyes. "This is not about ghosts. It's about survival, about a promise." Daniel finally sat across from her, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "Say it then," he demanded, his voice hard. "Say whatever you came here to say." Alara's breath hitched, but she didn't look away. Instead, she placed her hand gently over the chip, as if protecting it. "Marcus knew he might not make it back," she began. "So he told me things he never told anyone else, not even you." The words cut deeper than any wound. Daniel felt his chest tighten, anger and betrayal sparking like fire. "He trusted me with everything," Daniel said through clenched teeth. But Alara's reply was sharp. "He trusted you with his life, Daniel, but he trusted me with his legacy." Her words struck like a thunderclap. The room felt smaller, heavier. Daniel's heart hammered as she continued. He knew the war was bigger than orders and ranks. He knew the aliens were not the only danger. Her voice lowered even more, almost a whisper. "He told me the real war is being hidden from you." Daniel leaned closer, his voice sharp. "What are you talking about?" Alara's hands trembled slightly, but her eyes stayed firm. "Marcus discovered a secret mission, something the higher command is covering up," she said. "And he wanted you to know, because he believed you were the only one who could finish it." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The room spun for a moment. "Finish it," he echoed. Alara nodded, her face pale but unshaken. "Yes, Daniel. He wanted you to carry his burden, his fight, his purpose." Daniel felt the weight of her words press against his chest like stone. He wanted to scream, to deny, to walk away. But Marcus's voice haunted him even in silence. If there was a message waiting in that chip, then the truth was right in front of him. And truth was more terrifying than any battlefield. Alara's eyes softened, but her next words were sharper than any blade. My proposal is simple, she said. Take Marcus's mission, continue what he started, and take me with you. Daniel froze. The words echoed again and again in his mind. Take me with you. It was not just a request. It was a demand wrapped in sorrow and fire. Alara leaned closer, her voice trembling but unbreakable. I am not asking you, Daniel. I am telling you. I will not let his sacrifice fade into silence. The silence between them stretched like a battlefield trench. Daniel's fists clenched around the dog tag at his neck. He had thought grief was his heaviest burden. But now, before him, stood Marcus's sister, carrying not only her brother's memory, but a mission that could rewrite the war. And she was asking, no, insisting, that he walk that path with her. Daniel finally whispered, his voice hollow. You don't know what you're asking. Alara's reply came quick and sharp. No, Daniel, you don't know what you're refusing. The room fell silent again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of grief. It was the silence before a storm that would change everything. The words hung in the air like fire. Alara's proposal refused to leave Daniel's mind. Take Marcus's mission, take her with him. It was a weight heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. Daniel paced the narrow room, his boots striking the floor with restless force. His chest ached with every breath. His heart told him to protect Marcus's sister, to keep her safe. But his duty screamed that she had no place in this war. No place in the fire that had already burned her brother away. Alara watched him in silence, her eyes sharp as steel. She did not flinch at his anger. She did not lower her gaze at his silence. She sat straight, hands folded, as if daring him to refuse. The resemblance to Marcus burned through Daniel like a spear. It was as if Marcus himself was staring back at him, demanding an answer. Finally, Daniel stopped. His voice was rough, torn between grief and rage. You don't understand what you're asking. Alara rose from her chair, her face pale, but her spirit unshaken. No, Daniel, I understand more than you think, she said. You see war as a cage, but I was raised inside that cage too. Her words cut deep. Daniel had imagined Marcus's sister as someone far from the battlefield, a life untouched by smoke and blood. But her eyes told a different story. There was pain there, yes, but also fire. The same fire that had burned in Marcus every time he charged into danger. Daniel turned away, gripping the cold edge of the table. Marcus died because of this war, Alara, he whispered. And you want me to drag you into the same fire. Alara stepped closer, her voice sharp. No, Daniel, I want to walk into that fire myself. The words hit him like a hammer. Daniel closed his eyes, memories rushing back. The battlefield, the screams, the silence after Marcus fell. He wanted to shout, to forbid her. But deep down he knew, this was not a fragile girl standing before him. This was a woman who had already chosen her path. Alara's hand brushed the data chip. Her voice softened, but carried an edge of sorrow. Marcus wanted you to finish his mission, but he also wanted me to have a choice, she said. And I choose to stand beside you, not behind you. Daniel's chest tightened. His mind wrestled between duty and desire. Duty to protect her, to keep his promise to Marcus. Desire to honor her courage, to not chain her in silence. The conflict ripped through him like a storm. He slammed his fist against the table, the sound echoing through the quarters. Damn it, Alara, you don't belong in this war, he growled. But Alara stepped closer, her voice unwavering. And yet here I am, she replied, standing in front of you, carrying the same fire Marcus carried. The silence that followed was heavy. Daniel's breath came fast, his fists trembling. He had fought aliens, he had fought death itself, but nothing had ever shaken him like this. Not the battlefield, not the silence of loss. Only this impossible choice between protecting her or accepting her. Alara's final words cut through his storm like lightning. You can turn me away, Daniel, but you will never silence me. She placed the data chip firmly in his hand. And when you listen to Marcus's voice, you'll know why I must be part of this. Daniel stared at the small, glowing chip. The weight of it burned into his skin. It was more than a message, more than a mission. It was a test. And he knew, no matter how much he wanted to resist, the storm had already begun. The data chip felt heavier than steel in Daniel's hand. It was so small, yet it carried the voice of the man he had lost. The voice of the brother he could never forget. Alara stood still, her eyes fixed on him, waiting. Daniel placed the chip into the console, his hands trembling. The screen flickered, static filled the room, and then a voice broke through. It was Marcus. Alive again, clear and strong. Daniel, the recording began. If you're hearing this, then I didn't make it back. Daniel's chest tightened as every muscle in his body froze. Marcus's voice carried sorrow, but also something heavier. Something secret. There's no time for grief, brother, Marcus continued. You need to know the truth. The message revealed a hidden mission, a secret operation buried deep within the war. Marcus had uncovered proof that the alien enemy was not fighting alone. There were humans, commanders, leaders, working with them, selling information, trading lives for power. Daniel's fists clenched as the words poured out. The war is not just against aliens, Marcus's voice said. It's against betrayal, against the rot inside our own command. Daniel staggered back, the air knocked from his lungs. He wanted to deny it, but Marcus's voice carried no doubt. Daniel, the recording said, I was marked for silence when I learned too much. If I fall, Alara will find you. She knows everything. The message ended in static, leaving the room colder than before. Daniel stared at the console, his breath heavy. The truth was a blade cutting deeper than grief. His own leaders, his own people, were part of the enemy. And Marcus had died not just in war, but because of secrets. Alara stepped forward, her eyes shining with both fear and fire. You see now, she whispered. This is why he gave me the choice. This is why I came to you. She placed a small device on the table, its surface glowing faintly. This contains the files Marcus gathered, proof of everything, proof that will put a target on anyone who carries it. Daniel looked at her, his voice sharp. And you want to carry it? Alara nodded without hesitation. I already do, Daniel. The moment I left home, I became part of his fight. The soldier inside Daniel screamed to protect her, to keep her far from this darkness. But another part of him, the part that remembered Marcus's fire, saw the same fire now burning in Alara. She wasn't just Marcus's sister. She was his shadow, his echo, his continuation. Daniel pressed his palms against his face, the storm inside him raging. You don't understand the weight of this, he muttered. Alara's reply came sharp as a blade. I do, and that's why I'm still here. Her eyes met his with unshakable resolve. You can walk away, Daniel, but I won't. Not now, not ever. The silence that followed was suffocating. Outside, alarms echoed faintly through the base, the sound of another skirmish, another fight. But inside the room, a new war had begun. Not against aliens, not against soldiers, but against the lies that had been hidden all along. Daniel knew there was no going back. Not after hearing Marcus's voice, not after seeing Alara's determination. The mission was alive, and it was now his to carry, whether he liked it or not. Daniel sat in silence, the glow of the console fading to black. Marcus's last words echoed inside him, sharp as blades. The war was not only against aliens, it was against betrayal. Against men who had sold their souls while soldiers bled in the dirt. Against shadows that lived inside their own command. Alara stood across from him, her face calm, but her eyes burning. She had given him truth, and with it, no place left to hide. Daniel clenched Marcus's dog tag in his fist, the cold metal digging into his skin. He had sworn to protect Marcus's memory. Now he realized protecting that memory meant carrying on his fight, even if it meant tearing down the walls of his own army. But Alara's presence weighed on him more than the mission. She was young, stubborn, and burning with fire. Marcus's echo lived in her, but she was not Marcus. She was something else, something Daniel could neither protect nor control, and that terrified him more than any battlefield. You shouldn't be here, he whispered again, his voice low. But Alara stepped forward, her voice unwavering. I am here, Daniel, and I will not leave. She placed her hand gently over his, steadying his trembling fist. You think this fight is yours alone, but it isn't. Not anymore. Daniel looked into her eyes and saw no weakness. He saw resolve carved by loss, sharpened by truth. The same fire Marcus had carried, now alive in her. And for the first time since his comrade's death, Daniel felt something stir inside him. Not peace, not hope, but direction. A path forward, even if it was one carved in blood. He rose to his feet, his voice heavy with decision. If we do this, Alara, there is no turning back. Alara's reply came quick and sharp. There is nothing left to turn back to. The weight of her words sank into him. She was right. The war had already taken Marcus, already stolen their past. All that remained was the future and the mission that now burned in their hands. Daniel picked up the small device Alara had placed on the table. The files Marcus had died to protect. The proof that could unravel everything. His grip tightened. This was no longer about orders or survival. This was about truth. And truth was worth fighting for. He turned to Alara, his voice steady. Then we fight together. Her eyes glistened, but her jaw held firm. Together, in that silent room, they sealed a pact. Not of blood, not of duty, but of choice. A pact that bound them to the same storm Marcus had left behind. Outside, the alarms grew louder, soldiers rushing to prepare for another alien strike. But inside, Daniel and Alara had already stepped into a greater war. A war not only against the enemy outside their walls, but against the darkness hiding within. For the first time in weeks, Daniel felt the silence break. Not with grief, but with purpose. The path forward was no longer empty. It was dangerous, it was uncertain, but it was theirs. And as Daniel looked once more at Marcus's tag, he whispered into the silence. Brother, your fight is not over.